My parents tried to take everything I worked for and gift it to their perfect firstborn, but what I revealed in court left them destroyed. My parents tried to strip me of all I earned just to hand it to their precious firstborn. But what I did next in court turned their world upside down. I'm Cassandra, 36 years old, and I grew up in a house where the pecking order was crystal clear from day one. My older sister Stacy, 39, was the golden child, the firstborn princess, the heir apparent to everything our parents owned. They never bothered hiding this uncomfortable truth. They'd openly discuss how Stacy would inherit the family estate, the savings, all of it, right in front of me like I was invisible furniture. Their reasoning? She was born first. That's literally their entire justification for decades of favoritism. I became the forgotten daughter, the one expected to smile and nod while Stacy received the royal treatment. For years, I watched this unfold like a cruel reality show I couldn't escape. Stacy got the master bedroom upstairs with the private bathroom, while I lived in what used to be the den. She received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday complete with insurance coverage. I got a lecture about public transportation building character. When college time arrived, Stacy's tuition to Northwestern was paid in full. I graduated with $47,000 in student loans and a part-time job at Target. My best friend Sarah witnessed this family circus throughout high school. Your parents treat Stacy like she's destined for royalty, while you're just the spare heir collecting dust, she'd tell me with characteristic bluntness. Sarah wasn't exaggerating, she'd seen it firsthand during countless sleepovers and family dinners. The pattern intensified as we entered adulthood. When Stacy married her husband Simon 5 years ago, my parents gifted them $35,000 toward a down payment on their dream house in Riverside. When I asked for similar assistance 3 years later, I received a patronizing lecture about financial independence and pulling myself up by my bootstraps. Stacy's career path was paved with golden connections. After graduation, Dad leveraged his business relationships to secure her a marketing director position at his golf buddy's advertising firm. Zero experience required, corner office included. Meanwhile, I started at entry level in a Phoenix accounting firm, grinding through tax seasons and weekend certifications to climb the corporate ladder. Dad didn't even know what department I worked in until I'd been there for 4 years. Last spring, I finally saved enough to purchase my own place after years of relentless budgeting and sacrifice. A beautiful 4-bedroom house in Scottsdale with mountain views and a 2-car garage. The property needed extensive work, but I spent 8 months transforming it into my personal sanctuary. Custom kitchen cabinets, refinished oak floors throughout, converted the spare bedroom into a home office with built-in shelving. This house represented everything I'd accomplished independently, bought with money I'd earned through countless 60-hour weeks and aggressive financial planning. For the first time in my life, I owned something that belonged entirely to me. My name on the deed, my rules, my sanctuary. No family politics, no favoritism, no strings attached to parental approval. Or so I naively believed. 2 months after settling in, my parents invited themselves over for Sunday dinner. Mom critiqued my decorating choices while Dad inspected my renovation work like a disapproving building inspector. After we finished eating, they exchanged those meaningful glances I remembered from childhood, the ones that preceded life-altering announcements. "Cassandra, sweetheart," Mom began with artificial sweetness, "your father and I need to discuss your housing situation. We think it would make more sense for Stacy to take over this property," Dad announced with the same casual tone he'd used to discuss weekend weather plans. I stared at him, convinced I'd misheard. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" Mom jumped in with her perfectly rehearsed explanation. "We're simply trying to manage family assets responsibly. Stacy has children who need adequate space. You're single with no immediate plans for a family. It's the logical solution for everyone involved." "Logical solution?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "This is MY house. I bought it with MY money. There's absolutely nothing to discuss here." Dad leaned forward in his chair, employing that intimidating posture that used to terrify me as a child. But I wasn't 8 years old anymore. "Nobody's taking anything from you, Cassandra. This is about family unity and practical resource allocation. Stacy would naturally allow you to remain here temporarily while you find something more suitable for your lifestyle." Before I could formulate a response, Stacy emerged from the kitchen where she'd apparently been eavesdropping on the entire conversation. She wore that infuriating smirk I despised since childhood, the expression of someone who'd never been denied anything in her privileged existence. "Don't take this personally, Cass," she said with condescending sweetness. "It's simply about what makes sense for the family structure. You really don't need all this space for just yourself." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floors I'd personally refinished. "This is my home. I'm not signing anything over to you, Stacy, or anyone else in this family. End of discussion. Period." The temperature in the dining room plummeted 20 degrees. My parents exchanged that familiar look they'd perfected over decades of unified front presentations, the expression that appeared whenever I dared to resist their carefully orchestrated plans. They departed shortly afterward, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with disappointment and barely concealed frustration. I spent that evening pacing through every room of my house, half convinced I'd hallucinated the entire surreal conversation. What kind of family demands you surrender your home like some feudal tribute? What kind of sister considers that a reasonable request? The sheer audacity was so breathtaking I actually found myself laughing out loud at midnight, standing alone in my kitchen trying to process the absolute insanity of what had just occurred. The following morning, I called Sarah, the only person who truly understood my family's twisted dynamics after witnessing them firsthand for over 2 decades. "Sarah, I think my family has completely lost touch with reality," I told her, recounting the previous evening's bizarre confrontation. "Honestly, Cassandra, I'm not even surprised," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Stacy has always acted like she's entitled to everything you have. Remember when she tried to claim your scholarship money in college?" I did remember. I'd earned a $5,000 merit scholarship through academic achievement, and Stacy had actually suggested I should share it with her because family supports each other. My parents had backed her up until I threatened to decline the scholarship entirely and take a gap year. "This situation is different though," I insisted. "This is my house. How could they possibly believe I'd just hand it over?" "Because you've never truly stood up to them before," Sarah pointed out with uncomfortable accuracy. Sarah's words hit harder than I wanted to admit. She was absolutely right. I'd spent decades swallowing my resentment for the sake of maintaining family peace. But this time would be different. This time, I had something worth fighting for. After that dinner confrontation, the harassment campaign began with military precision. Mom started texting me constantly with elaborate guilt trips. Family members should support each other unconditionally, and Stacy's children deserve a stable environment, and why are you being so incredibly selfish about this? Dad escalated to phone calls featuring lengthy speeches about family responsibility and thinking beyond my own narrow interests. He'd drone on about the family legacy and how I was disrupting generations of tradition by refusing to cooperate. My Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister and fellow master manipulator, joined the offensive with her own series of judgmental phone calls. "Your cousin Jennifer gave her starter condo to her older sister when she got engaged. That's what real families do," she lectured me during one particularly irritating conversation. I reminded Patricia that Jennifer had been gifted that condo by their grandmother in the first place, so the situation wasn't remotely comparable. She hung up on me. Stacy herself proved to be the absolute worst part of this coordinated assault. She began showing up at my house unannounced with Simon and their children, treating my property like it already belonged to them. They'd walk through my rooms pointing at fixtures and discussing renovation plans for once they moved in. "This wall definitely needs to come down," Stacy would announce, gesturing at my living room. "We need an open concept layout for entertaining Simon's business associates." During the first few visits, I attempted to remain diplomatic, repeatedly reminding them that this was my house and I had no intention of selling or transferring ownership. They'd smile and nod patronizingly, treating me like a temperamental child having an extended tantrum. "We completely understand you're emotionally attached to this place," Simon would say in his most condescending tone. "Change is always difficult to process." Their kids, aged 7 and 9 and spoiled beyond belief, would rampage through my house like tiny tornadoes. They'd jump on my furniture with muddy shoes, leave sticky fingerprints on my freshly painted walls, and rummage through my personal belongings while Stacy and Simon did absolutely nothing to control their behavior. "Children will be children," Stacy would say whenever I pointed out their destructive antics, as if property damage was some inevitable natural disaster beyond parental control. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon when I returned from grocery shopping to find Simon's SUV parked in my driveway and their entire family inside my house. They'd retrieved the spare key I'd foolishly hidden under a decorative rock for emergencies. We were just in the neighborhood, Stacy said casually, while her youngest was literally drawing on my dining room wall with permanent markers. Thought we'd stop by and take some measurements. Get your children and get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. Stacy gave me her signature look of practiced outrage. They're just playing around. Don't be so uptight about everything. I confiscated my spare key and had the locks changed that same afternoon. Sarah came over to help with the installation, shaking her head in disbelief. Cassandra, this is absolutely next-level entitlement, she said as we installed new deadbolts. You need to start documenting everything that's happening. Taking Sarah's advice, I installed a comprehensive security camera system covering every entrance to my property and began maintaining detailed records of every interaction with my family. The documentation would prove invaluable sooner than I anticipated. The worst incident occurred about 3 months into their relentless campaign. Besides my house, my greatest pride and joy was my 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, a classic muscle car in pristine candy apple red with the original 289 V8 engine. I'd spent 3 years meticulously restoring every component, from rebuilding the transmission to reupholstering the interior with period-correct materials. Countless weekends in the garage, thousands of dollars in authentic parts, and hundreds of hours of my personal time went into that car. I was in my kitchen preparing lunch when I heard an unusual scraping sound coming from the driveway. Looking out the window, I witnessed Stacy's 9-year-old son Trevor deliberately dragging a large rock along the passenger side of my Mustang, carving a deep gouge from the front fender to the rear quarter panel. I sprinted outside, my blood pressure skyrocketing. What the hell do you think you're doing? I shouted. Trevor looked up at me with that same smug expression his mother had perfected, still clutching the rock like a weapon. It's just a stupid old car, he said with deliberate malice. I completely lost control. I grabbed the rock from his hand and hurled it across my yard, then gave him a firm shove that sent him stumbling backward onto the grass. Get away from my car right now. I yelled through clenched teeth. Trevor immediately began wailing like I'd broken every bone in his body. Stacy and Simon came rushing out of my house, followed by my parents who had apparently been inside planning their next strategy session. What is wrong with you? Stacy screamed, gathering Trevor into her arms dramatically. He's just a child. Your child just caused $3,000 in damage to my car, I replied, pointing to the deep scratch that had penetrated through paint and primer to bare metal. Simon stepped forward with his chest puffed out aggressively. It's just a car, Cassandra. He didn't mean any harm by it. Are you completely blind? He did it deliberately and maliciously. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder with that patronizing gesture he'd used throughout my childhood. Sweetheart, you need to calm down immediately. Children make mistakes. You cannot prioritize material possessions over family relationships. I shrugged his hand away violently. That's exactly what's wrong with this entire family. Your precious Stacy and her spawn can destroy whatever they want, and I'm expected to smile and accept it graciously. He's 9 years old, Mom said, looking absolutely horrified. You physically pushed a child to the ground. I pushed a vandal who was deliberately damaging my property, I corrected. And where were all of you when he was destroying my car? Sitting inside planning how to steal my house. Aunt Patricia, who had apparently been invited to this family ambush, emerged from my porch. This is exactly why you're not ready for major responsibilities. You can't even control your temper around innocent children. The family immediately closed ranks against me, all of them glaring like I was a dangerous criminal. Not one person acknowledged Trevor's deliberate vandalism or offered to pay for repairs. After they finally left, I stood in my driveway running my fingers along the deep scratch in my Mustang's paint. 3 years of restoration work damaged in seconds by a kid who knew exactly what he was doing. And somehow I was being portrayed as the villain. The next morning, I called Simon directly. I want $3,500 for the damage to my car. Professional restoration will cost at least that much. Simon actually laughed. You're kidding, right? It's just a scratch. Use some touch-up paint. This isn't a negotiation. Either you pay for the damage your son caused, or I'm filing a police report for vandalism and an insurance claim naming Trevor specifically. He's a minor, you idiot. Nothing will happen to him. Actually, as his parent, you're legally responsible for damage he causes. And I have security footage of him doing it deliberately. After a long pause, Simon's tone changed. I'll give you $500. That's more than generous. $3,500 or I file the report today. Your choice. He hung up on me. 3 hours later, I filed a comprehensive police report for vandalism and submitted a claim with my insurance company, explicitly naming Trevor and documenting that Stacy and Simon had refused to cover the damages. I included detailed statements about the pattern of harassment and trespassing my family had been conducting. The officer taking my report seemed skeptical initially until I showed him photographs of the damage and text messages from Simon. Family disputes get messy, he admitted. But property damage is property damage, regardless of who caused it. 2 days later, Simon sent me a text, "Got your little police report. Good luck getting any cop to care about your family drama. You're embarrassing yourself." But this was just the beginning. About 4 months after their initial demand for my house, Stacy showed up with a greeting card from my parents. Inside was a syrupy message about family legacy, along with a hand-drawn family tree that showed my house sketched in under Stacy's name. A sticky note read, "Just sign the papers, sweetheart. It's what's best for everyone involved." I tore it up in front of her face. "Get off my property immediately." Stacy's expression turned furious. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be. We're trying to be reasonable about this situation." "There's nothing reasonable about trying to steal my house." "It's not stealing when it's family," she said, as if that logic made any sense whatsoever. Around this time, I started noticing signs that something deeper was happening. Stacy had always been entitled, but this level of desperation seemed disproportionate. She'd been unusually vague about Simon's construction business lately, giving generic answers about expansion plans and upcoming projects that never seemed to materialize. I decided to investigate further. Checking Stacy's social media, I noticed subtle signs of financial strain. Their planned vacation to Hawaii had quietly disappeared from her Instagram. Simon's business page hadn't been updated in months. Their daughter was suddenly attending public school instead of the private academy they'd been bragging about. Something wasn't adding up. The level of panic they were showing about acquiring my house went beyond typical family favoritism. This felt like desperation born from circumstances I didn't fully understand yet. 2 weeks later, I received a phone call that would change everything. The call came from my bank's mortgage department. "Ms. Henderson, we need to verify some information about a recent refinancing application that includes your property as collateral." My stomach dropped. "I haven't applied for any refinancing. There must be some mistake." "We have an application submitted by Thomas and Linda Henderson, your parents, listing your property as secondary collateral for a substantial loan." "That's impossible," I said, my voice barely steady. "They don't own my house. I do." "That's exactly what our verification process flagged," the representative confirmed. "The documentation they submitted doesn't match our property records." After hanging up, I immediately called Sarah, who rushed over with her cousin Jake, a paralegal who had access to county records. What they discovered that afternoon changed everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation. The family estate my parents constantly referenced as their legacy was mortgaged beyond belief, not just once, but 4 times over the past decade. Each refinancing had coincided with cash injections into Simon's various business ventures, all of which had failed spectacularly and quietly. Simon's construction company had folded 18 months ago. His real estate investment group had dissolved after some lawsuit I'd never heard about. His restaurant venture had closed within 6 months of opening. Each failure had been hidden and covered up by my parents extracting more equity from their home to keep Simon afloat. "There's more," Jake said, pointing to recent foreclosure documents. "They're 8 months behind on payments. The bank has already initiated foreclosure proceedings." Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. They weren't pursuing my house because of some family tradition or Stacy's entitlement. They desperately needed my property to bail themselves out of the financial catastrophe they'd created by repeatedly funding Simon's failures. But the discoveries got worse. Jake found evidence that my parents had recently attempted to secure a new loan using falsified documents claiming they owned my house as an investment property. The bank's verification process had caught the fraud attempt, but they had definitely tried. "Here's how they did it," Jake explained, showing me notarized documents. They created a fake family trust backdated 3 years, listing all family properties including your address, even though you didn't own the house then. They forged what appears to be your signature as a trustee. The attempted fraud was documented in black and white. They had used my address and property details but replaced my name with theirs on loan applications. Stacy's signature appeared as a witness on several documents. She wasn't just a bystander in this scheme. Reading through the paperwork made me physically ill, not just from the betrayal but from the sheer incompetence of their plan. Did they really believe banks wouldn't verify property ownership? Did they think I wouldn't notice if my house suddenly became their collateral? Armed with this evidence, I contacted attorney Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in real estate fraud. After reviewing my 3-inch binder of documentation, photos, texts, emails, property records, loan documents, and police reports, she leaned back in her chair. "This is actually quite straightforward," she told me. "They've attempted loan fraud, identity theft, and document forgery. We have multiple legal options available." "What do you recommend?" I asked. "Well," she said with a slight smile, "the nuclear option would be pressing criminal charges. They could face serious jail time for forgery and fraud. Or we could pursue civil remedies, restraining orders and lawsuits for damages." I chose the nuclear option. "Let's prepare criminal charges," I told Rebecca. "Draw up everything, fraud, identity theft, forgery, the whole package. I'm done being their doormat." The next time Stacy showed up unannounced, my security system alerted me before she reached the front door. I opened it before she could try the handle. "Trespassing again, Stacy. Bold move considering I have a stack of police reports with your name on them." She attempted to push past me. "We need to talk about this situation." I blocked the doorway. "Everything goes through my attorney now." "Attorney? Don't be ridiculous, Cassandra. This is family business." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "You tried to steal my house and commit identity fraud. The security cameras are recording this entire conversation, by the way." For the first time, I saw genuine fear flash across her face. She retreated to her car without another word. The following day, Rebecca sent formal cease and desist letters to my parents, Stacy, Simon, and Aunt Patricia. The letters detailed our evidence and warned that any further contact would result in immediate legal action. The response was swift and predictable. Mom called sobbing, claiming they'd never meant any harm. Dad sent an angry email about how I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Stacy didn't contact me directly, but I heard through family gossip that she was telling everyone I'd lost my mind and was fabricating lies. None of them denied the fraud attempt. Not one. 2 days later, Mom sent a group text, "Family meeting Sunday, 2 p.m. Attendance mandatory." I spent the weekend organizing evidence with Rebecca. We compiled everything into a presentation-ready binder: property documents, harassment timeline, financial fraud evidence, vandalism records. Every text, email, and photo neatly arranged and time-stamped. I arrived with Sarah waiting in her car as backup. The entire family was assembled: my parents, Stacy and Simon, their kids, Aunt Patricia, and several cousins clearly brought as reinforcements. Dad began with his usual patriarchal speech about family unity. Mom followed with tearful comments about how I was destroying the family with my selfishness. I let them finish, then placed my thick evidence binder on the coffee table. "I know about the mortgages," I said calmly. "I know about the loan fraud attempt using my property. I know about the foreclosure proceedings. I know everything." The room fell silent. Stacy went pale. Mom stopped mid-sob. "I got a call from the bank," I continued. "They're very interested in the falsified loan applications listing my property as collateral." Dad tried to regain control. "This is all a misunderstanding." 4 mortgages to fund Simon's failed businesses isn't a misunderstanding," I interrupted. "Forging documents to secure loans using my house isn't a misunderstanding. It's fraud." Stacy stood up, pointing accusingly. "You ungrateful." "Sit down," I said without raising my voice. "I'm not finished. I've filed criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is now investigating." The room erupted in chaos, but I continued speaking over them. "You had years to treat me fairly. You chose Stacy every single time. Now I'm choosing myself." I walked out, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. 6 months later, they were convicted. Stacy and Simon received 2 years probation and substantial fines. My parents lost their house to foreclosure. I kept mine. Sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And sometimes you have to fight for what's rightfully yours.